Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Well, I think we're live. Are we live? Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. How are we? Welcome to J.E.D.I. Welcome to Lunchtime with J.E.D.I. Well, you might be saying, what is J.E.D.I? Well, who are you? First of all, my name is Lori Porter, and I am the operations coordinator for Love Akron. We are a faith-based parachurch organization in the Akron area. Uh, we work really diligently to work with other change makers to ensure that our city can thrive. I like to tell folks that Love Akron is the connector and the convener. Somebody says, what is your sweet sauce? Our sweet sauce is love. And so today, we're here with J.E.D.I at lunchtime. And I don't know if you remember back when the George Floyd incident had occurred, there was quite a bit of unsettledness in our country. And so it was our desire to really get ahead of what could happen and really begin to dialogue with the folks in the Akron community to try to make some sense of how we move forward as a people of color, as a community of diversity, of diverse groups of people and ethnicities. And so we started these conversations that were called connection versus collision, because we had a choice that we could make, right? We could collide or we could connect. And it was connection versus collision, the black and white conversation. And so we created opportunities for panelists to come on and talk about what was, the buzz in our communities, what people were hearing around the dinner table, what was unsettling for people of color, and what was the struggle of understanding for people that were not people of color, but somehow to seek understanding so that we could continue to move forward together. We would have the panel discussions, and then, one of the things I said to our executive director, Coach Kemp, I said, Coach, if this is going to be another one of those kumbaya, everybody comes and we talk and then we go home, and that statistic that Bishop Johnson quoted to us, that 75% of white folks say that they do not have a meaningful relationship with people of color. If we're going to just go back home and that statistic is still going to be true, then I think what I said at that time was, could I respectfully decline to be a part of this? Well, what was birthed out of the panel discussions was our way of saying to people that were coming in and listening and posing their questions was, if we're going to do this, then there has to be some next steps. We have to do something besides just talk about it. We've got to have some action steps. You all know that Love Akron talks about going from a noun to a verb. So one of the things that happened in the next step group was that after that week of panel discussion, the next step group, which was anybody who wanted to come in and talk about the next step following the conversation the week or 2 weeks before. And so there was a small group. It might have started out with about 25 or 30 people that would just gather, and we would have conversation about what was talked about, how we felt, what it made us feel like when this person said that or the other. It was very enriching. And so little by little, we continued to take next steps. And here we are, probably 18 months later. And there's a group that is really stuck together, black and white folks that have come together to say, you know what, I'm sick of what I'm seeing in our country today. We know that if it's going to change, we got to do something different. And one of the things that we know is that relationships are everything. Bishop Johnson also said during that time that we can only move at the speed of trust. Isn't that amazing? So if I don't trust you, chances are we won't get very far, right? Chances are, if I don't know you, why would I trust you, right? We teach our children stranger danger, right? You don't know them. They're a stranger. Why would I trust you? What merits me trusting anyone? Well, I grow in trust with individuals when I get to know them, when I build a relationship with them, and I understand that they are in no way intending to hurt me uh, or cause me harm, but in fact, that they would love to do life with me and we can grow together. And so today, I'd like to take a moment and say this is a lunchtime meeting. It's a long lunchtime meeting. We're here from 11:45 until 12:15. So I want to encourage you to like and to share and to inbox some people and tell them to come on. We're going to be talking about inclusion today, and really mostly focusing a little bit, I would say, on health and wellness again. And I know that we've had a lot of conversation around mental health, but statistics have proven, and we've got Amy Wade of the Summit County ADM Board that's going to be joining us today. We've got Jocelyn Grant, South Street Ministries, and then she also founded a ministry of her own that's going to be joining us, along with my sidekick. And so, there's some things that happen in J.E.D.I. There's some things I said to Kathy, and you'll meet her in just a moment. I said to Kathy, Kathy, I'm gonna need you to come on J.E.D.I. next week with us. And so we were laughing about it. I said, because we're a diverse group, but it may not look so diverse if there's just a bunch of Black people on there talking. And so she said, oh, so you want me to be a token white? And I said, well, yeah, now that you said it that way, absolutely. So that's, but listen, we can do that. We can do that. And for somebody who doesn't have an authentic, meaningful relationship with a person of another ethnicity or even another faith, you can't understand how people can joke like that, can just say what we say and know that it is done in love and that we love one another. So we are on Facebook right here with you. If you know folks that don't have Facebook, but they have YouTube, tell them to go to YouTube and they can watch us today. And so J.E.D.I. is really the next steps gathering that was happening after those conversations. And J.E.D.I. is justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I know that Kathy is out there somewhere, my sidekick for the day. I know she's out there. Where's she? The sidekick. There she is. Hey, honey. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. Thank you.
Good, good, good. I am so glad to have you with me today. I think we're waiting on another co-host that may join us a little later, another one of our fellow J.E.D.I. sisters.
I've been here.
We'll bring Penny. Hey, Penny, how are you? Penny
I've been
Carr,
here.
good to have you with us.
Good. Thank you.
Oh, good, good.
Yeah.
We're
I've been
gonna,
sitting for a while. I said I've been sitting for a while, but it's okay.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I guess there was something going on back there. They couldn't see you. But Kathy, talk to us just real quick about your experience with J.E.D.I. You and I, we've been trying to get to lunch for a long time. We still haven't done it, but we've had some amazing telephone conversations, haven't we?
We
Yeah,
have.
talk to our viewing audience about what J.E.D.I. is. I believe you have the statement. Um, I always want to call it a statement of agreement. That it's the vision statement, which really is a statement of agreement in a sense, if you will. But I just want to give you some space to talk about J.E.D.I., what it's done for you, what it means to you, and then let's just tell them what our vision statement is for the J.E.D.I. group.
Wow. Lori, thank you. I love this group. I absolutely have never experienced anything like this in my life. It has been life-changing. I'm a little Jewish girl. who grew up primarily in a little Jewish world in Canton, Ohio. And even though my high school was half black, half white, it was very segregated. And I spent the majority of my time in the Jewish community. And I've spent the majority of my time, my professional life, in the Jewish community. And George Floyd is murdered. And I basically lost it. I cried. It broke my heart. It was like this sign to do something about it. And fortunately, and I'll make it shorter, I was introduced to Coach Kemp, and he changed my world. I started watching the Connection versus Collision and meeting some of the folks that are on here today, as well as the rest of our J.E.D.I Council. And I found a place for my voice, but more importantly, and you'll hear this in the vision statement, more importantly, I've learned to listen more. I've learned so much. It's opened my world to the community, to diversity, getting to know my Black friends like I've never done in my entire life, learning how to speak appropriately without being afraid, because many times I'm still afraid to say the wrong thing and to hurt someone's feelings. But I think we have built up such a great trust with each other that I'm able to make mistakes, and you'll laugh about it, or you will, say, maybe you should have said this, or I love that you said that. So it's just rocked my world. And there's nowhere else I would rather be than here every other week of every month. So with that said, I will read our vision statement that we created, and it's amazing. The purpose of the J.E.D.I Council is to provide the opportunity to encounter individuals from diverse backgrounds in the quest for a higher level of understanding and connection that our times call for. In our commitment to justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, we will listen, learn, and lead responsibly to address the 4 levels of racism as we have identified them. Number 1, internalized, within us. Number 2, interpersonal, between people. Number 3, institutional, within society or organizations. And number 4, structural racism, within systems. Responsibly listen. We assume personal responsibility to humbly listen when others are ready to tell their stories and move at the speed of trust, making the commitment to stay in the conversation with each other. Responsibly learn. We assume personal responsibility to learn about the experiences of others, to be able to thoughtfully discuss the issues that we seek to advance to a new level of effectiveness and change. And responsibly lead. We assume personal responsibility to help develop strategies to address the forces of injustice while committing to work in the spirit of peace, knowledge, and love.
Excellent, excellent. And I know that is true, because you all have really worked toward that. You guys have done walks together. Tell us some of the things that you guys have done specifically working together. What has been some of your experiences?
Are you asking me?
Yes. What have you done? And with who? Because I know you've met with some folks, and I know you and Coach Kemp have walked. I know there's a book that you all have read together. I call myself an honorary J.E.D.I because I get to kind of show up and be a part of, not necessarily as close as the rest of you, meeting 2 or 3 times a month.
I guess I'm going to say that I probably haven't met as many people as some of our other Jedis have. And a lot of it has been about COVID, without a doubt. I've spent quite a bit of time with Susie online, working on editing our videos. And I have met with Penny. We had an incredible lunch together and actually found out that we went to the same high school. Didn't know that. And even though she's quite a bit younger than me, we had a lot of the same experiences, and it was fabulous. And I look forward to more conversations. Lori, you and I have spoken. Coach Kemp and I have walked, have talked. I've had him over here for lunch. I just made a date with he and his wife for this summer to go to Blossom. And so I'm looking forward to meeting everyone at some point, as now that it's nice out and we're getting out more. But it's only the beginning of our relationship building. That's how I feel.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, I think we got we've had a couple of things going on. You guys know how Wi-Fi and all that stuff, and then when we do this, lighting is you got to find the right place in the room. But I've got these circle lights here, and that's what you know. But hey, Penny, good to have you.
Great.
How are
Good.
you?
I'm doing wonderful.
Good, good, good. For our viewing audience, Penny Card is another one of our Jedi members. And I had somebody say to me, "Oh, I thought it was something like Star Wars." I said, "Well, technically, if you look at the theme of Star Wars, it sort of kind of is, you know, because we want to intervene for the sake of good, right?" But Penny, it's so glad to have you today as the co-host with us here. So good to have Kathy. Kathy's going to be manning our Facebook. So if you have questions out there in Facebook, you can type those questions in. Sometimes what we realize is that we can do these lives and the viewing audience has all sorts of questions that we never, first of all, we're not aware of. So of course we don't answer them, but we want to give a platform for individuals that are watching through YouTube and Facebook to put your questions out there for us and or for our guests. And you can ask a specific question to a guest. So if you have a question, put it in the Facebook chat. And then that's when you'll see Kathy again. She'll be coming back in to ask those. I'll be popping in and out just a little bit to talk to you all. But you know, Penny, if you could tell us, Jedi has been going on for about 18 months now. What has been your personal journey with Jedi?
I really love Jedi because what I found is that my journey is not alone. That is, especially when you peel back the layer and not make everything about you, you can really embrace yourself to find that all not be able to identify with the same struggles. We all can identify with the same virtual reality. So like one thing from Jedi that I've learned is that like Kathy's reality may be this little bucket, my little reality may be this little bucket, but when we can come together and coincide together, we find out, we actually get to some truth and there's some understanding that maybe we didn't know before, or an assumption, or we just assume, oh, you know, that may be something that they do. And it's not necessarily a thing of they do. It's something that we can collaborate together and be aware. And that's what I really love about Jedi is that we're aware now of our surroundings. When we hear news, we've even talked about commercials. We talked about our neighborhoods and communities. We talked about businesses. We've talked about political things, and just to be able to view and understand from all kind of different groups, regardless of what their religion is, their beliefs are, be able to embrace each other and respect those beliefs. It's been just awesome.
Right. That's the truth though, because you know we have so many different types of biases, things that we learned as children that we found out was not necessarily true growing up. You know, stereotypes, right? That we know we have found is not true. I am, you know, how people are an equal opportunity employer. I'm an equal opportunity human being. I give you a chance until you prove to me that you are not trustworthy or that I should be frightened. I am no more afraid if a black guy is walking toward my car at night than I am if a white guy is walking toward my car. You know, I'm gonna lock my doors either way. And so, you know, but the truth is, some of our biases and some of our upbringings have kind of allowed us to adopt some things that we have learned through this moving together. I saw Amy Crawford on. She's out there watching on Facebook. She's a Jedi. Uh, we could call it Jedi class #1 member. And just, you know, meeting people and getting to know them, and then, you know, the amazing thing to me is that uh, and you talked about it earlier, Kathy, when you heard about George Floyd and how it just grieved your spirit. And that's the same thing that happens to us as human beings, period. When you hear of someone suffering and your heart is tender just because you love people, that is a normal, natural reaction. Tell me this. I'm asking you ladies this, and then we've got Jocelyn off in the wings, and we've got Amy Wade off in the wings, and we're going to bring them on in just a moment. But what has been the greatest challenge that either of you have encountered as a part of J.E.D.I? I'm going to start with Penny.
Yeah, froze up. What was the last part of the question?
What has been your greatest challenge being a part of J.E.D.I, this diverse group that's going to dive into, you know, we're gonna do the work in decreasing the number or percentages of people that say that they don't have a meaningful relationship, keyword meaningful relationship with someone of another ethnicity. What has challenged you the most?
I think for me, it's time. I've always, I've always been engrafted with all kind of cultures. I've never been really limited to my own culture. But I think that really dedicating the time, commitment, and what I mean by that is that there's still quite a few council members I seldom had a chance to break bread with, be able to talk to you or share their experience.
Yeah, I think there might be a Wi-Fi issue there. But Penny was saying time was her biggest challenge. What challenged you the most, Kathy?
Well, when I thought about it, and I just actually said this, was I was so afraid to say the wrong thing. You know, these are people that I'm just trying to build this relationship with, and I don't want to hurt any feelings. I want to respect people from where they sit, just as I hope they'll respect me from where I sit. That's number one. Number two, I think the big challenge was telling my story. And, you know, I just said this to my cousin this morning. You know, I grew up in a nice neighborhood, had nice clothes, I got to travel. I had a lot growing up, and I was embarrassed in front of my white friends and black friends to show who I was. It was hard. It was really hard. And so at the beginning, you know, I have opened my heart, but it was a real challenge to share that.
Yeah, yeah. I think that we've been fortunate, and I know Penny, so I know that's her story as well, is that we kind of grew up in homes where, you know, one time we couldn't buy sugar and or butter. It was something. I think something happened with the sugar cane in Florida. I don't know what it was, but we couldn't get sugar one time, and something else happened another time, and there was a butter shortage or something. And I remember crying. That wasn't because we didn't have it. I just couldn't understand it. I thought we were poor. And I just started, my mother's like, "What is wrong with you?" And I'm like, "We're poor. We can't buy sugar." And she was like, "Girl, we can't buy sugar because there's none in the store." But you talk about, we talk, and we're going to go on with our Jedi, because you and I mean, we can all keep talking all day. But when you talk about privilege, we can talk about white privilege, but we can also talk about black privilege, because there's some of us that have been protected from some things. And I grew up in a family with parents that owned a business, and they dealt with every ethnicity and faith of people that are out there in the world. And I saw my mom and my dad stand toe to toe and stand their ground, and how they were very well respected by those that did business with them, because they were people of color, but they were people of high integrity. And so, yeah, it's been interesting. So I know we have a class coming up real soon, and we're going to be sharing the love, not just sticking with the group that we have, but starting another class, and we'll talk about that a little later on. So if you're interested in being a part of Jedi, and you're interested in, you know, finding out more about Jedi, you can just go to loveakron.org. There's a form right there on the front of our page at the bottom that says for more information. You can fill that out, let them know that you want more information about Jedi, and someone will reach out to you. Just a reminder, we want you to share, share. And we've got Jocelyn in the back. And so I think we have Penny, and we got Penny out there. Yeah, okay. Look at us. There we go. Well, Penny, Jocelyn, so good to see you. Jocelyn is a part of Jedi as well. And just a reminder, at about 12:30, we'll be bringing Amy Wade on with us. And she is the executive director for Summit County ADM Board. She's going to talk to us about what we're seeing in our city as it relates to health, inclusion, wellness, inclusion, and how we're coping. Still, we're not after COVID, people. We are still in it, right? We're still in it. People are not dying, thank God, at the rates that they were. People are not getting as sick at the rates that they are. More people have been vaccinated. Some people have still chosen not to. And either way, we're still in it. So we always want to be mindful to continue to be careful and to take every precaution to keep not just yourself safe, but all of those around us that they love. Well, I think Kathy and I are going to skedaddle, and we're just going to kind of turn it over to Penny. We got some light over there. Yay!
Yeah, I switched computers.
Yes. I know this technical stuff. It's learning, but Penny, I know this is your first time co-hosting. We're so glad to have you do that. Give me a break. Thank you. But Jocelyn, take it away. Have a good time. I'll see you guys in a few minutes.
Okay. All right. So good stuff. Hi, Jocelyn.
Hello.
Okay. All right. Whoo. Awesome. Well, welcome today. And so today in Jedi Live, we're going to focus on the I, and that's inclusion. And so we have, as Pastor Lori has so wonderfully introduced, Miss Jocelyn Grant. She's a personal friend of mine, and I just love her sincerity. She's also a praise and worship leader, and she's also an actor, and the list goes on, her creativity. And I'm just so blessed to know her, and I'm sure you're going to be blessed to know her as we go along. And so what is the inclusion when it comes to wellness, physical, social, and mental health? What does that mean to you?
Well, good afternoon, Penny. How are you? Good afternoon to our viewing audience and all of the individuals who will be joining us today. I've had some technical difficulties, so I'm just
We all are.
Yes. I'm just glad to be able to be a part of this conversation. When it comes to inclusion, and as a person who serves on the advisory board for Summit County for the arts, and we advise a lot of individuals, but also more specifically Arts Now, the Arts Now board, and those individuals. A lot of our conversation is about inclusion, and I think what it means to me is really in the definition of the word itself. No one should feel excluded in in any um, arena that would allow for individuals to receive certain services or participate um, in a way that would be beneficial for the greater good, for the masses. There are some
Mm,
things that are exclusionary. We know that. We know that there
right.
are things that are exclusionary. We understand those things. However, when it comes to medicine, when it comes to education, when it comes to the arts, when it
Hmm.
comes to community involvement, government, there should be no exclusion when it comes to those things. There should only be inclusion because I think, is it on our money? I think maybe it's on the dollar. Is it e pluribus unum? Out of
Yes.
many, one?
Yes.
That's what it means. So
Hmm.
so why would there be any exclusion? There should only be inclusion when it comes to that. And then there are other more um, specific groups when it comes to Black people and people of color. So I don't like to put Black people. Well, I'll say um, American people who are the descendants of the formerly enslaved. I don't like to put that group in with people of color because there are different um, factors that affect set those separate groups. And so I would like to make sure that when I say Black people, I'm specifically talking about Black people. When I say people of color, I'm talking about other people of other ethnicities who are also American. Um, and then you have those who are segmented because of um, uh, their uh, like they may be part of the LGBTQIA community,
Hmm.
or they may have physical disabilities, or those things. Those groups should not be excluded from the things I mentioned: education,
Hmm.
um, the arts, government, things of that nature. Because I just don't personally believe
Okay.
that people who are part of different communities, if their mind works and
Right.
their mouths work, then they should be able to do what they and they have the majority. Well, I won't say the majority, but they have the well-being of human beings in mind. Then I think it is important for individuals to be a part of those conversations. So
And,
that's what it means to me,
mhm.
and that's the work I do in the community.
And that's great that you did that distinguish between. I'm sorry, I keep getting alerts popped up on my. Okay. Um, I'm I'm glad that you have brought that up and really defined what inclusion was, because a lot of times it's all mapped in together, and to be able to say that the what your culture is, it does not necessarily mean that it's part of inclusion, which I think is wonderful. So today what we're going to be focusing on is where you identified possibly today is COVID and the effects that COVID has had on um, our community, right? And with the population of folks that you are connected to in general, that's what we're going to be talking today. Whether that are people that are young or old, and Black, young, white, they're what are they saying about the effects of COVID, and how are they seemingly coping with the sessions of COVID? Because I remember when COVID first had hit within our community, it was hard because I don't know if this was myth or assumptions, like there wasn't lunches being provided. There was a lot of myths that, certain groups or colors could not get COVID. Masks were a big major concern. Parents were in array because now all of a sudden you had to teach your kids. You became your kid's teacher. We had daycare concerns. We had shortages all the way around. So from you, from your audience, and from the world where you monitor and work in, how did COVID affect that whole world?
Well, I work in nonprofit. More specifically, I'm the education and volunteer director at South Street Ministries, What that means is that's a lot. Those are a lot of words.
Yeah.
What that actually means is I help to create and run youth programs as well as the volunteer base for South Street Ministries. So when the pandemic first began, or the lockdown, should I say, first
Hmm.
began, we had to quickly regroup. So I took some pointers from some celebrities I was following, and they
Oh,
were
like which
on
ones?
comedians.
Okay.
So
Oh, okay.
there's a guy named Kemp on stage, and he has a whole slew of friends, and they were actually starting to do a lot of their just for fun at first, communicating over Zoom. So I
Okay.
said, we'll use Zoom. I didn't even know what it was for, so I prayed very hard. And so what we decided to do, and what I feel like I was led to do, was we ran program because we could not be in physical contact with our students,
Hmm.
with one of our main programs, Rich Kids Enrichment Program. We ran program through Zoom.
Okay.
So we literally would gather together with all the students who could get on, and we would have a check-in, and then we were able. That was the first time we had ever had volunteers from across the country,
Oh,
because they were able to volunteer electronically, virtually,
okay.
and
And
then
what
we all.
what did those volunteers look like? Who was that group of volunteers?
So they were college students.
Oh,
Some of them from Ohio, but they had moved across the country to go to school.
okay.
So they had the opportunity and some time to volunteer with us virtually while they were away. We also had at that time our first virtual intern, and she was in Queens, New York,
Okay.
but she
And
was able to do her internship with us virtually. So they were able from
now,
all
were
over the.
they volunteering teaching the kids, or were they
Yes.
volunteering
So
with
yes.
COVID needs? What were their details? Can you describe that?
Yes. So they were actually working directly with the students because, as you said before, parents are not always teachers. So
Hmm.
there was a serious challenge academically with parents being able to find the time to teach your kids, because a lot of parents began to work from home, or they would
Hmm.
still have to go to work, and so there was no one to monitor the students. So we tried our best to make sure first our families had Wi-Fi. Most of them did,
Oh, wow.
and then we went forward with Zoom, and we were able to tutor our students to prepare them for the next school year through Zoom. Now we also helped and delivered groceries for 13 months throughout the pandemic. So we
Wow.
made sure we would go shopping once a week and then go. At first, it was every week, and then we were going every 2 weeks. And then it was once a month as the pandemic began to change, as there was a vaccine available, because parents began to be able to go back to work and things of that nature. But we were trying to fill in as many gaps as possible academically, but also practically for our families. Now, how that it affected the students specifically was emotionally and mentally. They forgot how to be together, and there was a lot of anger. Once
Hmm.
our students came back to program in person, and we did that gradually, to make sure that we could keep everyone safe. We were wearing masks. Everyone had
Hmm.
to register for each day. You could not just show up, because we were trying to keep numbers low.
Now that
So
you said that, Jocelyn, not to interrupt you, how was okay before COVID, during COVID? Now, when you said that people had to come back, students had to come back, what did that look like as far as mental health? Because I know that a lot of times with childhood trauma, that's a lot of trauma for a family to have to experience. Sometimes as we age, we get gray hair, right? Or it shows out, the stress shows out in different areas. But for the particular community that you're working with, how did that look like coming back after we're kind of like balancing with COVID?
as I said before, they were angry.
Yeah.
They were angry. They were fearful, and they really just didn't know how to be in a formalized space. I've heard the same thing from teachers inside of the school buildings that behaviorally a lot of students, which we partner with a local elementary school through the support of United Way. But even other teachers that I have relationships with that are in other buildings, they are saying that students just forgot how to be together. But also, you have a lot of administrations who
Mhm.
kind of don't know how to handle the trauma that has happened to our students, and so there you cannot possibly continue business as usual. You're going to have to address it, and now you have a lot of students,
So
which is
how do
something.
we address that coming
Well,
into?
okay, now you have a lot of students who are dealing with mental and emotional things that maybe they did not deal with before, or if they did, it was covered by the hustle and bustle of life. Well, when you're
Mhm.
still for 2 years or a
Mhm.
year and a half, you can't escape it. And so one of the things we've done with our program, Rich Kids Enrichment Program, as well as another program that I founded, hashtag Adjust the Crown, is we have included emotional wellness in our enrichment. So it's not just us talking about emotional wellness. I have welcomed therapists,
Awesome.
licensed
I was going to ask that.
therapists, to work with our students because we need someone who knows what they're doing, not just in general, but specifically working with youth to be able to give them not only the language to understand what they're feeling, but also to identify it first, but then to also convey it to others in a way that we can be helpful to them. So we invite therapists every week. Every week there is a therapist.
So
Today, there'll
how
be a
is it
therapist for
that,
my students.
okay, so how's the participation with that? Are we seeing a great, because I know a lot of times people come to community like therapists in different group settings and they just sit. So how's the community on board with that?
So when it comes to the parents and the families that I'm involved with, they are completely on board with it. As a matter of fact, um, I'm grateful and thankful that I have relationships with a few behavioral agencies,
Mhm.
wellness agencies, mental health agencies that I can call, and we've been able to refer families and children to having individual um, um, uh, therapy sessions with a therapist with those agencies. But when it comes to our groups, parents are completely on board, and it allows our students to have an opportunity to advocate for themselves. So I can advocate for them. Their
Mhm.
parents can advocate for them, but they have the ability to tell me, Miss Johnson, I'm not having a good day,
Okay.
or Miss Johnson, I need to do this, that, and the third. And what we do, they don't just sit. So we've done everything
Okay.
from creating a song to physical games. They've run around. They've built towers out of paper. They've done sound bowls. They've done yoga. They've done anything you can think of. A lot of modalities for them to be able to channel what is happening inside of their bodies and their minds and their spirits, and be able to convey that to us so we can help and best serve them.
Okay. So one more question before we go into the next session. How do you engage the future?
And could you be more specific? Engage the future
Okay.
as in
So
which
do you
part of it?
anticipate like from like maybe after this summer that the trauma um I guess the effects of the trauma will still be ongoing, or do you think that it'll lighten up, or as long as COVID keeps going and we're coping, do you think that there's going to be a season where we get out of cope mode?
I
I know I know it's an unfair question, but that's what I think when I hear these things and I hear that we got
yeah.
therapists. We got to look at the positive. Okay, so when can we come out if possible?
Here's the thing. We don't really I can't really predict when or how we can COVID will quote unquote end or
Hmm.
any of those things. I think that if we don't have individuals who are proactively working to provide services or give access, because there are a lot of services that are available, but people don't know.
Right.
If we can get the word out and provide access to those services for young people, for families, then we have the opportunity to help not end, but quell so much of what's happening in mental health. So many people are committing suicide, so many,
Yes.
especially Black men,
Hmm.
but also black women as well, but especially Black men in
Hmm.
general, which is a serious concern, but
Yes, since
especially Black men.
2018.
Those numbers are very, very high. And so
Hmm.
we have to, first of all, let's dispel the myths about going to therapy makes you weak. Going to
Right.
therapy makes you less than who you are, and you're not a strong person, because all of those things, those are holdovers from slavery, that we have to handle things and deal with things, and not speak about them. Well, our ancestors did that, and our older family members did that in order to stay alive, so that we
Yeah.
would have
And that,
someone to raise us.
and that is
And
so true. And I'm
now,
sorry, but we're running out of time.
okay,
But you are so right. And you touched on a lot of sensitive areas and a lot of areas where we can see potential growth because we
right.
know we're the problem. So now we're looking for the solutions, and it begins here. And so now we're going to invite Lori Porter back onto the call, onto the conversation, and we're going to continue from here.
Yeah, great conversation, ladies. As you were talking, Jocelyn, about suicide, my question to you is, in the space that you've been working in, what have you seen with the youth as it relates to suicide?
I've seen more of our youth entertain it
Mhm.
openly. They joke more about it, which
Mhm.
is that it's becoming more normalized,
Yeah.
that this is an option, that this is something that is a viable option in order to end whatever pain that they're feeling.
Mhm.
And what my hope is, that the work that I'm doing and my colleagues are doing, is that we allow them the opportunity to speak whatever it is they feel their truth is, but
Mhm.
also to let them know that suicide is not what you think it is. You don't come back. You
Hmm.
There is no, it's not like a video game. It's not, you don't continue to live. It happens and then you're gone. And then there's no opportunity for life to get better. There's no opportunity for a new experience, because
Hmm.
you've ended your opportunities. And so we're hoping that, as we continue to work with the students, that we, um, push push that idea back, that it's something you could come back from.
Mhm.
And I think I like what I just said. I've never said that before. That when we commit suicide, and as a person who had suicidal ideations when I was a child and as a teenager, it is the suicide is literally ending all opportunity.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so we have to make that a continual conversation with our younger kids, because I serve K through 12,
Mm.
with our younger
Okay.
kids, with our adolescents, and with our teenagers, that we don't want to end opportunities. Even when we're in pain, we have to find a way to work through them, to live through them, to love through them, but we don't want to end our opportunities.
I love what you said, um, because it is the end. It's the end, and I know
Hmm.
that we've done a lot of work with grief recovery here at Love Akron. Our major support finance supporter in that work has been the Summit County ADM board, and so Jocelyn, if you can bring Jocelyn back on the screen, I think that one of the things, Jocelyn, that um, is majorly important is going to be, this is my opinion, not, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a counselor, but I know that when we suffer loss, whether we suffer loss at 5 years old or 50 years old, it impacts us in ways that we are not emotionally many
Right.
times prepared to adjust to. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of times when we speak in terms of emotion, the average person doesn't know what to do with the emotion that comes
Right.
behind a loss of any kind. My children, I moved maybe to different city on 4 occasions for work, for ministry. It called us to different places. And so I thought my kids were fine.
Mm.
We sit and talk now. They're 36 or 41. My two younger, my bonus babies, they didn't have to move so much. But I found that it was not a good experience for them.
They're giving you aha
So
moments.
when I'm looking at them now, then I am understanding how they were experiencing grief at a young age, but I didn't have the tools to help them through it. And so I'm just going to put in a shameless plug right here. I'm going to put in a shameless plug and say that we don't do grief recovery for children, but we do partner with Red Oak Behavioral Health. They do great work with children. We have a relationship with Minority Behavioral Health. They do great work with children. We have a relationship, well, and not so much today, but in the years in the existence of Love Akron, we have always worked with Emerge Ministries, and they do great work with adults and children. And what I'm saying, and what I want to say to our viewers, is that if your child is isolating, if your child's behavior is different, if they're hoarding food all of a sudden, if they're not socially interacting anymore, there's some of their friends are dropping off the scene and they're just content to be alone. They don't want to go anywhere. I want to encourage you to reach out to, you don't have to choose those places that I just listed. I just listed the places that I know of that we partner with, that we know their track record and that they have great outcomes working with children, period, and with children of color. Penny, thank you for co-hosting. Don't go too far away. We're going to bring you back on. But Jocelyn, I'm going to ask you to stay for a second, and I'm going to bring on Amy Wade, who is the Executive Director of Summit County ADM Board. Hi, Amy. Thank you for being here with us today. I want to remind our viewers right quick to share and tell somebody that we've got the Executive Director of Summit County ADM Board on with us. And this is a great time to ask questions that you might want to ask about what's going on with alcohol, drug, and mental health in Summit County. Amy, we met, I think it was in 2015, right?
Yeah.
Direction. And under the leadership of our former county executive, Russ Pry, who is so loved by so many, but he really pushed hard for change direction to come to our community and for us to take steps. That was in 2015 toward, removing the stigma that is attached to mental health. And so the faith community, we pulled up that event, had an amazing event at the Akron Public Library downtown. I mean, people could get their continuing education credits during that symposium. There were great speakers. There were many committees that were formulated to carry out that change direction initiative. And Amy, you'll be better set to correct me, but I think the faith committee is maybe one of the only committees that stayed intact. Am I right?
You are correct. And I was proud to be part of that committee during the larger initiative. And, it's ebbed and flowed, but there's been a faithful few, that's really been committed to this work. And I think they were grateful to be at that larger table when we were having that conversation, and saw the impact that the collaboration could have between the faith community and the behavioral health community and the community at large, and making that impact, because we're all serving the same people. But I can tell you that our current county executive is definitely interested in maintaining change direction and, reaching out to those different sectors of the community as well to broaden the conversation.
Yeah, you're right. Because Eileen Shapiro, Russ Pry had actually died. And Eileen Shapiro stepped right in there. And you are right. And she has been a force that has been very supportive of all of the work that we have done with mental health beyond change direction, because we talked about grief recovery. And I wanted Jocelyn to stay on for just a moment, because I'd love to hear just your personal thought. This may not reflect the ADM board, but you're a mom, Amy. Are you a grandma yet?
Yes, ma'am. 2-year-old.
Me too. Right. That something in that melanin, girl. It just looks good on you. So we know what it is to bear the weight of not just watching our children, but looking at our grandchildren and considering what the world will be beyond once we're no longer sitting in the seats that we're in. Youth today, as it relates to mental health, is there anything that you can share with us that might help Jocelyn in the work that she's doing and for our viewers as parents, individuals? So I think I just opened that question. It's kind of dual. First, I asked for your personal, but then your professional. Also, talk to us about what you were seeing in numbers with youth in Summit County.
Yeah, and that was for me, right?
For you, Amy. Yeah.
Okay.
Talk to us. Yeah, talk to Jocelyn.
Yes. I think from a personal experience, being a mom, being a new grandmother, work, and then even professional and working with the schools and the outreach that we're getting for support and help. We've had some districts that have experienced multiple losses of youth due to suicide over the pandemic. And it all hits home, because even if they're not direct relation, I'm born and raised here in Summit County, so it has an impact. And even as we monitor these numbers in Summit County and what we're seeing in terms of suicides and overdoses, which we call our deaths of despair, there is not just numbers. And that's something that I talk about with my staff and I talk about when I'm in the community. These are people that we live with, we work with, and we play with on a daily basis. And they're leaving here for what reason? And I think this is what we're all grappling with as a society. And I can tell you it's what keeps me up at night as the director of the Alcohol, Drug Addiction, and Mental Health Service Board. That's part of our mission and our statement and what we seek to target and help build hope and resiliency in this community. But it's bigger than ADM. So the conversations that we're having is so imperative because what we've seen over the course of the pandemic is these things being overshadowed. And, these deaths of despair have not stopped. The overdoses have not ceased. Suicide numbers have been consistent, since before and throughout the pandemic. What we have seen is changes in the populations that are being impacted. Like these numbers are remaining the same, and that's because certain populations are seeing increases that's maintaining and sustaining that number, specifically our African American population. Because of how we're monitoring our data, we were able to see that in 2020, there was a significant spike in African American males. And so then the question is, what do you attribute that to? How do we address that? How do we have those conversations? When we look at our overdoses in the community, again, all deaths of despair when people are struggling with resiliency and hope and how they cope with what's going on in their lives, we've seen those numbers consistently increase over the course of the pandemic. And again, changes in the description of the populations that's being affected. So again, when we're talking about overdoses, African Americans weren't initially part of that conversation. 2015, 2016, when you said we started this conversation around, stigma and decreasing the stigma, but the substances on the street have changed, how it's being marketed has changed, and different communities are being impacted. So we have to change our conversation and how we talk about it, and it has to be a conversation. So again, breaking down that barrier, that stigma to talking about these things happen, and our strategies to talking about it has to change. As was mentioned earlier, within the Black community, there was, the dialogue was, we're not part of the overdose population. Where was everyone when there was the crack epidemic and how we responded to that? Or, Black people don't commit suicide. It's something that I grew up hearing. Like, we're resilient, that we have other ways of coping. That's just not what we do. And that is not the case. And the numbers and the data that I see that we're monitoring says something otherwise. So we have to have these conversations. We have to be transparent. We have to let people know that it's okay not to be okay, because we're all struggling in some way, shape, or form. It may look a little bit different, but we have to be able to identify it and be able to intervene early and give people the help that they need.
I love what she just said when she said it is okay not to be okay. Let me tell you, Jocelyn, I'm gonna just let you press into that a little bit. It's okay not to be okay because we struggle with that, right? Right? We struggle as a people. I mean, Amy just said it, but it's true. What would you say to people of color that it's okay not to be okay? Just from your experience, what you said.
You would like me to speak? Okay. Um, I will say this. Historically, we've always had to be okay. We didn't have a choice. And that's just the fact of the matter. So therein lies the tropes of we don't commit suicide, or we have other ways of coping, or we do this, we don't do that. We're stronger than that. And the truth of the matter is, it is because, as I said before, we have had to be. We didn't have a choice. If there was going to be a loving person to raise our children, just historically speaking, present, in order for our ancestors, for our elders to stay alive, they had to make decisions to be okay. That does not mean they were actually okay. They had to make decisions to smile when they were not okay. And so I think that because we've had to do that for so long, we have leaned into these myths of just being okay. And now, with the pressures of a global pandemic, the political things that have been happening, um, rampant and very bold and audacious um, brutalities that are happening that we have seen throughout this time, where there was a captive audience. We couldn't go anywhere. So we're on social media, we're watching television, and people are being literally lynched in the streets. And people now, they don't, I can't be okay because I'm not busy. I can't be busy. I can't go, to the store and run and do this and do that. And I got to take the kids over here, and I got to take them to karate practice, and I got to take this one to dance class, and I got to go to work, and I have to go, and I have to cook, and I have to clean, and I have to do these things. And when you have people who don't have the hustle and bustle to distract them anymore, and now they have to sit with their thoughts and their feelings, then people began to unravel, and they turn to not just suicide, but to substances. And so there's so much happening, and it's a compound. And this is a conversation we've had on the J.E.D.I Council. It is a multi-layered issue. So we can't just say any one thing. We can't blame any one thing. Literally, we have individuals now who have to face what we have not faced for centuries. And now it is more than just one thing, and it's hard to what do they say, when you let the worms out of the can, or whatever it is. But once you open that can, once you break the seal on it, you can't, it's hard to get everything back into that container. It's hard. And so now we have so many things that we have to address, because it hasn't been addressed for so long. I think that's the challenge.
I love that. Well, Jocelyn, I had to just get you before you left us. I just had to bring you up one more time. So, Amy, so thank you, Jocelyn, for being with us today. Thank you for being a part of J.E.D.I. But, I want to go back to Amy. I know that today we're talking about inclusion, and I think that Penny has a question for you. And so we want to posture ourselves to hear what Jocelyn just said. We want to let that soak in, but we kind of want to move forward. And Penny's got some questions about some of the.
Awesome. Well, okay, we're just going to plunge right on in there because we want to be mindful of time. So, what question I have is, what are the social determinants of health?
So when you talk about the social determinants of health, you're talking about healthcare access.
Yes, especially with dealing with COVID.
Absolutely. So health access to those healthcare resources. And I always like to remind people that the head is part of the rest of the body. So when we're talking about healthcare, we're talking about behavioral healthcare as well. So I always like to make that reminder, because sometimes people differentiate in terms of healthcare. And I can tell you, during the pandemic, that's a message we were screaming from the mountaintops, because our behavioral healthcare providers, they were still at work. They were still providing services. They could not go home and lock away. There were people in need of their medications and their counseling. We had to change how we did business, but they were still in the community. And it was necessary for them to be in that community, because stressors were even higher and people were at more risk.
Right.
Education access, social and community connections. We look at safe and stable housing.
Right.
And also you want to look at economic stability. So when I talked about, some of the things that we're seeing from our perspective in our agency, and it being bigger than just the ADM board, all of these things play into, individual well-being, the well-being of individuals, and well-being of communities.
Well, thank you. Awesome.
So when you talk about that, Amy, then explain to us how important it is for people to do their part. What can we do as a community? What can we do?
As a community, we can educate ourselves. It's not just up to the professionals. Education is key. And that's why I so love the collaboration through Change Direction and working with our faith community, because we work together to understand, kind of the threshold of what we provide to those that we serve, and when to pass someone, to the next level of care, understanding how all of our contributions, work to heal and make people feel better. But education has been the key in that. Like, how do you use someone's spirituality and faith, as an asset, as a strength in their behavioral health treatment? How do you acknowledge that? And on the flip side, faith is an asset. And when someone needs a little bit more, how do you make sure to have those connections and identify that and connect them to the appropriate services in the community? So we talk about, grief recovery management. We talk about resources like mental health first aid, which is also a free training in the community, in collaboration with agencies already mentioned, for the layperson, just to have the basic general understanding of what it looks like when someone is in distress, and how to get them resources. You don't have to be the expert. You don't have to fix it. You just need to have the will and the tools to be able to ask the appropriate questions and get people to the help that they need to help them feel better and overcome and thrive.
Yeah. Many times, we've seen over the course of the last few years, and some might say that we did not, you brought it up before, and I want to go back to it now, because people could look back in 2015 and look at the state of the opioid situation in our county. And I think, Amy, perhaps, excuse me, individuals may have lost faith. How do we speak to the minority population about, when we talk about inclusion, how were they, or how might they feel like they were excluded? But tell us what you have done to make sure that we are at the table and that we are being cared for.
Right.
Absolutely. So one of the things is starting from within. And that's within my organization, and how we even talk about what's going on. And first of all, you have to acknowledge what happened in the past. And that's something that I've always preached. We can't just march forward and deal with what's in front of us. We have to acknowledge what occurred in the past. And as we're setting precedent of how we deal with things that are happening now, we must respond in kind, regardless of the population that's being impacted. So this is the message that I'm carrying. I'm working with our counterparts, and there's going to be more to come out of the ADM board. But I can tell you that, it's built into law and to how we are organized here at the ADM board for our board of directors to have representation. So you must have people at the table. It's not just about diversity equity and inclusion, but it's about belonging and being in that space and having a voice in that space. And I'm a huge advocate for that. One of our former colleagues who we lost a few years back, Dr. Fred Freese, would always say, if you're not at the table, then you're on the menu. And, you know, you have to acknowledge that. So I'm a huge advocate for it. You know, just because you look around the table and it looks diverse, if those voices aren't elevated to talk about what that experience is like, you know, and how these services feel, you know, to different populations, then you're doing a disservice. So I mentioned, even in regards to, you know, the overdoses and how we have to change our strategies. You know, before it was around prescribing, over prescribing, people being injured. And we've seen the numbers in terms of opiates being prescribed significantly decreased due to the efforts that we've done to make sure that wasn't happening in our medical field. But like I said, now there's another issue out there, which is fentanyl, which is in everything. There's no such thing as recreational use. Everyone is at risk. We had cases a couple months back at Ohio State University where we had students thinking they were taking Adderall. And that's not what it was. Fentanyl was included. Everyone is at risk, and we need to have these conversations about how it's affecting these communities. And we can't be the same old messaging, because it doesn't translate, it doesn't relate. So again, you have to have the people at the table talking about how you impact these communities and working with these grassroots groups, folks with boots on the ground and know how to get through to the population that we seek to have impact.
You know, our viewers might be looking and they might say, so what table is that? How do I get to the table? How do I get my voice heard? What do you say?
Well, one of the things I don't think I finished my comment about our board and how it's in law that we have representation. So we must have someone that has lived experience with addiction. We're required to have someone with lived experience with mental illness on our board. We must have people who have served both of those populations, and we have to have family members of both of those populations on our board. So that's 6, you know, different areas of representation that's required currently by law. That's sitting around that table. But we talked about, you know, change direction. We talked about different coalitions and how we work to impact the community. We have our Suicide Prevention Coalition. Again, we're working diligently to make sure there's representation. So we're intervening in communities in the appropriate way. We have the Opiate and Addiction Task Force. We just hired a new coordinator for that. And one of the marching orders is who's at that table, because historically, I can tell you, I was in those rooms in 2015, and it wasn't the minority community, because they did not feel it was their problem, and it's everyone's problem. It's everyone's problem, and we all need to be at that table, and we need the feedback of the community of how best to place these resources, these dollars, these programs, these strategies, so we're not losing lives.
That's good. That's good. Now, you know, what can we do to support minority groups when it comes to access to mental and physical health care? And would you say that there is more access to minority citizens?
What we can do, and I can tell you what we're doing from the ADM board perspective, because we know that there isn't enough representation within the clinical scope of treatment providers to truly be representative of our community. So as we work diligently to do more recruitment and retention, to have providers that look like the people that we serve, we also have to provide education to the service providers that we have now. People need to be culturally aware. I kind of steer away from competent, you know, but you have to have cultural awareness of the populations that you're working with. I think J.E.D.I is great. These conversations that we're having helps contribute to that awareness and understanding and knowing what you don't know, you know, and being able to acknowledge what you don't know and being open to that conversation. Like I said, even some of the work here with my staff, we're reading a book. We have a book club. Whole staff is reading a book called Subtle Acts of Exclusion. And it's really foundational in looking at all different sectors of the community, whether it's race, gender, sexual orientation, but all the faux pas that, you know, anyone may step into at any time that works to effectively exclude a certain population from a conversation. So not microaggressions. People tend to get kind of defensive, when they're accused of microaggression, but the subtle act of excluding a certain group from a conversation just by what may appear to be a innocent comment sometimes. So, I'm working from within to make sure what we're portraying and leading by example with our providers and our community as we represent in the community, that we're able to demonstrate that and recognize within ourselves when we're effectively excluding people.
That's good, because I don't know if we honestly, Amy, just honestly, just conversations I've had with people, I don't think that they've known that they have done that, and in times past. And so, you know, just in every sector of our community, whether it's healthcare or social injustice, it doesn't matter. I think it just exists that way. Um, I know we keep talking about COVID, and we have to keep talking about it because COVID is, first of all, still here. Um, I do believe, I was talking to my doctor the other day, and oh Lord, I had to get tests and blood tests and blah, 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 blah. And I pride myself on the fact that at 61, the only thing, I don't pride myself. Hold on, let me be clear. I give glory to God. Now, whatever other people do, that's on them. But me, I give glory to God because, I take an occasional Excedrin, some vitamins. And so when I go to the doctor's office and they're like, bring your prescriptions. And I'm like, some elderberry, some vitamin D and vitamin C. But COVID came, it's here. We're not looking at it, I think, society as a whole is not looking at it like we were before. There are many more people that have been vaccinated. Vaccination certainly doesn't keep you from getting COVID, but it absolutely should prevent you from going on an event and perhaps dying. So it has a significant benefit, right? But since the time of COVID, would you say that you've seen minorities gain more access? And I know you talked a minute earlier, but I want to dive into that just a little bit more. How do you see that minorities have gained more access to healthcare?
So I can tell you from my perspective, what I've seen is more open dialogue, more outreach, whether it's through our system, through healthcare system, through private providers. I think people are more open and willing to seek help. So it's not as, the stigma and the taboo is not as strong as it has been in the past. But I also know, as overseeing a system of care, we've talked about the great resignation and people reevaluating their lives and moving on. And we are not immune from that in the behavioral health system. Everyone is looking for staff and looking for employees, and we know people are in need. And we're trying to make sure that we are there and ready to respond to that need. But like I said, I'm needing to go upstream and looking at how we funnel that pipeline for people to want to give back and build that interest in behavioral health, because they talk about after any pandemic, there's this expectation of this bubble that bursts. People are going to reemerge into this new normal and need supports. And I think we all have to be hands on deck and ready to respond to that. But I can tell you, just like most industries, we're in a crisis. So I know there are delays, not just in our system, but in other systems as well. And how we respond to that is going to be critical, because we must respond as a collective. But sitting from my seat, I'm always inviting feedback. How can I adjust if there are pressure points, if there are gaps? How can we respond to that in real time? And I can work within my system with our community partners to help meet that need. So I invite anyone, if there's issues or ways ADM board can stand in the gap and help support, then I want to hear that information from the community.
Yeah, I will tell you that it has just been an absolute joy to work with the ADM board. I know we're looking to continue the work of grief recovery method, and we started that pilot last year, and it's still going. And there are Those that have been trained that are still, matter of fact, I'm at week 5. This will be our 5th week of the class that I'm doing. So that yeah, you're right. We have to raise awareness. I know Kathy had something she was going to share, and she had a question for you as well. Kathy?
Well, it wasn't even my question, Amy. Somebody wonderful came up with this question, but I was curious as well. I remember back when the first COVID vaccine was available. And of course, luckily for my age, I had access before many other people. And it was frustrating for me because I went online, and we're talking about the digital divide. I went online, I talked to friends, somebody said, oh, this giant eagle, I just got a vaccine there. This person said, well, I just got an appointment in Mansfield. And somebody else went to Parma. We were like trying to help each other when you couldn't find anything online. And I'm just really curious if that digital divide was there, so maybe us white folks were able to access our COVID vaccines much quicker than Black communities, Black neighborhoods, and also, because it's still going on somewhat. We're still having to get vaccines, although it's much easier to walk in. I got my second booster recently, and I literally walked into a pharmacy, and I was able to get it. And I'm thinking more people can do that. But, is it still hard to get the vaccine, to get COVID tests, to get masks, to afford, at some point we're going to have to pay for COVID tests. So far, so good. We don't have to, but, I'm just curious if the digital divide still exists.
Yeah, so that was a definite factor. I mean, there was a lot of adjustment that had to be done during that period. And our electronic world became much more important to us. But I definitely want to give a shout out to Summit County Public Health and our health commissioner, Donna Skota, and the work that they've done. We actually live inside the same facility as Summit County Public Health. So we bore witness to all of the hard work that they did, and they're continuing to do. We just had a clinic outside our window here yesterday, that's open and available to anyone that comes in. But some of the conversation, again, is around the stigma. What was the vaccine? What's in the vaccine? How does it impact the community? So even when it became readily available, and you could just walk in, there was still work to be done. I can tell you from perspective of behavioral health, because I'm looking at our vulnerable populations, those with severe and persistent mental illness, addictions. The county stepped in. We had support from the state and federal government, making free tests available, which are still out there. Masks are still available. Again, public health and the resources that they provide. So resources are there, where they were thin initially, but they currently exist. And I think it's just about the broader conversation and reducing the concerns, the valid concerns and stigma that we had around the vaccine, and addressing that from a medical perspective. But we worked in different ways, whether we're taking technology to our clients, to our staff, working with different partners to make sure devices are available. There's training on, I know we have faith-based communities working to train like our older adults on how to use those devices and making sure they have access. So it really took a collective and a community effort to help, close that digital divide that you described.
Wow. I'm so happy to hear that, Amy. That's something I wasn't aware of because I live in my own little bubble here. So I'm really happy about the work that you're doing and the county is doing. And, we need to continue that. And something that keeps running through my head is how do we educate for more mental health people that can do what you're doing, that can be a therapist? How do we get, and especially with minorities, how can we help them afford an education to become a counselor to these people? The government that's giving all this money, ARPA and all that, should be giving us money to do that. And maybe they have, and I haven't seen that, you know, with the ADM board.
Yes, there's a lot of things in works. I mean, it's been recognized from all the way up to the White House, and the need in this. Our governor's State of the Union addressed this. There has been earmarked dollars in terms of building this workforce. I can tell you, we're doing local work and collaborating with University of Akron in terms of how we recruit and get people into this field and introduce them into the field of social work, clinical counseling, fields that help to support the hope and resiliency within our community. And I think part of it is how we talk about it. You know, so many times we talk about, you know, this is hard work and little pay. I'm here to tell you, as a licensed independent social worker, there's opportunities, and the reward of giving back is so much greater. But there is additional opportunity for those who are interested in this field. I invite anyone to talk to me or my staff and others, and we can introduce people to our agencies and our system and see just what that looks like, because there's a need, there's a growing need, and we need people in the field. We need more representation. And I think if you direct people in that way, and you need more information, just reach out. We're here to stand in that gap and provide some education and get people connected if they're interested in serving in that capacity.
Well, and I know Lori's coming back on, but Amy, I just want to say thank you so much for everything you're doing in the community. And I'm so glad that Love Akron is a part of what you're doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy, for being with us. I want to say to Penny, who's in the back, thank you for being on, Jocelyn. But Amy, last question before we get out of here. How can people get help for the trauma of these events that they've experienced? And can you share with us some of the programs that ADM supports and sponsors?
Absolutely. So a couple have already been mentioned, you know, and I'm grateful to be able to give my testimony as going through, you know, the grief recovery method. But, you know, when you talk about grief and the things that we grieve, I don't think people realize the whole spectrum of what that means. I think you talked about moving and the impact on your children. So we're talking about all types of loss, and people need to identify the impact of that what that can have on their life. So working with Love Akron and doing the grief recovery method and going through that process with the coaches, I think is an awesome opportunity. Mental health first aid training, again, as we look across different systems, working with our business sector, our faith sector, different sectors, just training the layperson to recognize that in their peers, their colleagues, their family members, to help them get too late. To get help before it's too late. The earlier we intervene, the better the outcomes for people. I can tell you in terms of other resources that we support at the ADM board is our crisis hotline. So if someone just wants to talk to someone, they are feeling overwhelmed, they don't know where to turn, they want more information about resources, they can call our crisis hotline at 330-434-9144. And easier when we're talking about our youth and, you know, kind of the digital divide between older adults, younger adults, and, you know, they like to text. There's 24/7 text service, again, for suicide prevention and crisis support. So you can text the crisis text line, and you just text 4HOPE, the number 4, HOPE, to 741-741. And there's someone standing by to respond to those text messages. And finally, I'll promote our addiction helpline, which helps connect people directly to agencies. Hopefully that's within their community. They collect a variety of information to try to get people connected to the right services. What's your insurance? You know, where do you live? What are you struggling with? We have 0 way to get in for assessments because of how we have this set up. And you can call the addiction helpline at 330-940-1133.
That was great. Amy, I cannot tell you. It's always a joy to see you. It has been my joy to work with you over these years and just to really see your heart. You know, even Jerry Craig, who was in that seat before you. I love Jerry, love working with him. We are such a rich county and community. And, you know, the world has its struggles, and we do too as a city and as a county. But one thing that gives me great joy and great hope is there are folks at the table who I believe have a heart to really move our city forward so that we can thrive. And I believe that the vast majority are doing their level best to ensure that the citizens of Summit County and of Akron are given all the tools and things that we need to stay well. So thank you for your service and for all of your work. Well, to our viewing audience, I want to say that we'll be here again next month. We'll be doing lunch with J.E.D.I. We encourage you to come in. We're going to bring our special guests in closer to the 12:15, 12:30 hour. We realize that some people only have a small amount of time for lunch, so we're going to try to keep you in mind and get our special guests in like we did today during that 12:30 to 1 o'clock hour. I want to say to those of you that have joined us, if you're watching us after this, it's okay. You can simply just roll through and see all the numbers and the information that has been provided for you to get help if you need help. We want to simply remind you that we're here loving Akron. Whatever you do today, wherever you go today, we just want to remind you to make sure that you continue to love Akron. We'll see you next time. Have a great day.